The Victory Garden, Chapter 1. If my brother Jeff loved anything as much as he loved airplanes, which I doubt, it was tomatoes. He used to swipe them from the Burts when he went over to cut their grass, and he'd eat them there fresh off the vine. It's a good thing old man Bert didn't catch him. That's all I can say. Jeff was on my mind as Dad and I worked in the garden on Saturday morning. That morning, that should have been the beginning of a normal weekend. Our tomato plants were already a foot high, and it was only late April. I tugged on the bill of my baseball cap and scanned the garden. All clear, I said. Secret weapons, said Dad. We leaned over the plants, pulled something from our overall pockets, and worked our way down the row. This is war, I said. Dad answered, Fire away. I wrinkled my nose at the smell of the leaves, musty, like wet dust. The yellow blossoms smelled awful too, but I didn't care. I was tasting the sweetness of the tomatoes to come and smelling the success of beating Old Man Bert again. A movement caught my attention. I snatched the cap from my head and covered my hand with it. Enemy approaching, I said. Secure ammunition, Dad said, shoving something into his pocket. Behind us, Tom Bert's voice bellowed. How's that garden, Ellen Marks? We shot up. Fine, Tom Bart. For some reason, the two men always called each other by their full names. Well, I hope you remember everything I taught you. The retired farmer was still shouting as he lumbered down a garden row, his huge frame casting a shadow over the tomatoes. Old Wolf, his German shepherd, tagged after him, tail wagging. Bert reached down and pressed a stem between a fat thumb and finger. You should pinch, he said to Dad. As usual, he said nothing to me. He pulled a piece off of a tomato plant and dropped it to the ground. Hey, I yelled. What are you doing? Dad answered. Pinching, removing some of the leaf and blossom clusters. See? He pulled one off and held it out to me. But why? I touched the cluster. It still seemed wrong to throw away parts of the plants he had worked so hard to raise. To get better tomatoes instead of just more plant. Dad nodded toward Bert. He taught us that one year, made a big difference. But I thought, I began, then stopped. I had caught Dad's wink. I shouldn't have taught you so much, Alan Marks. Mr. Bert said as he stood up. Darned if your tomatoes weren't almost as good as mine. Almost? My outburst was rude, but Tom Bert scarcely knew I was there. Well, the women did the deciding, he said, not to me, but to Dad. Women don't much understand farming. I seethed but held my tongue. I knew Dad enjoyed going at it with the old man. My mother would say, You two, the war is at the front. You aren't supposed to be fighting here at home. Who's fighting? The men would say, and clap each other on the back. As they bantered on, I scratched old Wolf's neck. Make a farmer out of the little gal yet, I heard Tom Bert say. Well, I guess he did know I was there. I pulled my cap over my face and stuck out my tongue. I hated being called that little girl. I was going on 12, and the last thing I'd ever be was a farmer. But I did like my time in the garden with Dad. I wanted to get back to it. I moved my fingers inside my pocket, wishing the man would leave. He had taught us about tomatoes, true, except for one thing. One secret we had learned from Tom Bert, but in a way from his wife. A woman as small and gentle as her husband was big and rough. The men's voices droned on in quiet conversation. Their teasing over for now. How's Mrs. Bert? Fine. Heard from the boy? The only time Tom Bert's tone softened was when he asked about my brother Jeff, almost as though he missed him too. Not in a while. Dad folded his arms and looked at the ground. We'll get this war over soon, Bert said. It was a conversation I heard wherever I went with my father. When was soon? I wondered. Tom Bert left, Old Wolf leaping out ahead of him, and we went back to our tomatoes. As our hands danced quietly among the leaves, I found myself counting the blossoms. Then the numbers became days. How many days do wars last? I wondered. How many gardens? How many more years before Jeff would be here again? At last, we reached the end of the row. I rolled up my cap and stuck it in my hip pocket as we walked up the back steps. Stillness had come over Dad. It was not about the tomatoes, I knew. There had been no letter from Jeff in a long time.